Between 1894 and 1897, there was a killing spree of up to 51 innocent people in central France that had a chilling echo to the sadistic Jack the Ripper murders 10 years earlier, when the killer, one of the most elusive serial killers of all time, stalked the dark alleyways of London's East End. Now France had one of their own. It began on the 19th of May 1894 in the French town of Vacher, where 21-year-old silk factory worker Eugénie Delhomme, aged 21, was found dead, her body terribly mutilated. She was the first of many more. The newspapers called him the French Ripper. As the body count rose, he was dubbed Le Tueur des Bergers, the killer of shepherds. It altered the way people went about their daily lives. Such was the fear of the locals that they could be next. The murdered and mutilated victims from remote rural communities, in secluded forest pathways and deserted barns, both male and female, ranged between the ages of 12 and 68, many of whom were shepherds and agricultural workers. Later in the year, a shepherdess called Louise Marcel, aged 13, living in Vacher, was found dead in some woods. Her throat had been cut and her body mutilated in a similar style to Jack the Ripper in London. The search for the murderer was to no avail. On May the 12th, 1895, a similar crime was discovered near Dijon, when the body of 17-year-old Augustine Monteau was discovered near a well-used road, although the mutilations were less severe. A few months later, a widow aged 68, by the name of Morud, was discovered dead in her cottage in Savoy. Her throat had been cut ear to ear, and the corpse violated. A pattern was emerging, as the modus operandi of the killer was similar, and this was borne out a week later, when a 16-year-old shepherd named Portalier was killed in broad daylight in a field in Bennus. His body had been systematically carved up and the pieces scattered across the field. 4 weeks later, the terribly mutilated body of shepherd Pierre Pellet, aged 14, was discovered in the mountains near Sétienne de Boulogne. The injuries that he sustained were done after he had died. The next victim, found a week later, was a recently married 19-year-old woman called Leroux, who was discovered with a slit throat and was disemboweled. She had been tending cows near Allier. 3 weeks later, 40-year-old Rosina Rodier from the village of Varennes-Saint-Honoré was found 100 yards from where she lived. She had been looking after a flock of sheep, and again her body was severely cut up and her throat cut, similar to the other killings. The murderer then took a pause until June 1896, when a 40-year-old shepherd called Laurent was murdered and mutilated near Lyon. Authorities did not make a connection between any of the killings until the summer of 1897. There had been 3 years of brutal killings, and the authorities were no nearer apprehending the culprit, when finally there was a violent piece of luck. During the morning hours of the 14th of August 1897, a man tried to assault Marie Herud while she was gathering wood and pine cones in a field in the Ardèche region. She valiantly fought back, and her screams soon alerted 2 of her children, as well as her husband, who came rushing to her aid. Although she was of slight build and shorter than the attacker, she managed to fight him off. The commotion was heard by 4 neighbors, who rushed to help and helped to restrain the attacker. As the men escorted him back to the village, the man shouted, "Look, I wanted to have a quickie. They wouldn't let me." They locked him in a shed at a nearby inn and kept him under guard, where one of them hurried to fetch the police from the station in Saint-Péray, who arrived back at the village after 6 hours, where the attacker was arrested. He was quickly identified as a man called Joseph Vacher, and the whole sorry saga began to unfold. Held overnight in the closely guarded shed Vacher shouted all manner of obscenities and ranted on about how he had rights and wanted to exercise them on all women. When one of the policemen, called Charlon, joked that Vacher should get married, he took the statement seriously, saying, "No, I have as many rights as anyone over all women, and I want to use those rights," and continued to scream vulgar insults for the next few hours, refusing to interact further with Charlon except for spitting at him when he got close. Vacher would attempt twice to escape the shed, being prevented by Charlon. At one point, Vacher asked for a drink. Charlon gave him a glass, and while in the process of filling it with fresh water, a few drops landed on Vacher's shoe. This resulted in him throwing the glass in Charlon's face, who reciprocated by hitting him with the metal water jug and kicking him to the ground, as Vacher proceeded to threaten the policeman and his family with death and torture once he got out of prison. Asked why he didn't just hire prostitutes instead of attacking random women, Vacher replied, No, I respect myself more than you do. I don't want the ones you talk about. I need young girls, shepherdesses or cowgirls," adding, "If you were in my place, you would do like me, but you have women and I have none." Vacher was born in November 1869 in the village of Beaufort, 40 miles from Grenoble, to illiterate parents. As a child, he had a bad temper, having once shot at a group of other boys with his father's rifle for heckling him. Another incident occurred while working on the family farm, when he attempted to strangle his younger brother, Louis, because he thought he was shirking while helping him push a wheelbarrow. In the summer of 1884, a 10-year-old boy named Joseph Amier was raped and murdered inside a barn in a neighboring town. The crime was blamed on a tramp, although the then 14-year-old Vacher would later be suspected as having been the true perpetrator. When he was 15, the family, being overwhelmed with a temperamental youth, sent him to a very strict Catholic school, where he was taught to obey and to fear God. He was meant to be educated there until he was 18, but was expelled after 2 years. He found work as a restaurant worker. He contracted syphilis and had to have his left testicle surgically removed 6 months following the diagnosis. When he was 18, he was reported for the attempted rape of a 12-year-old boy on a farm in Beaufort. The victim, Marcelin Bourdon, was attacked while baling hay in a barn, but managed to punch Vacher and alert fellow workers. He avoided any charge as he fled town to the relief of the village due to his habitual aggressive behavior and could not be traced. He traveled to Geneva and stayed with his brother Auguste, to whom he admitted to the attempted rape and possibly referenced other violent crimes he committed. After he was thrown out, he moved to Lyon, and seeking to escape from the poverty of his peasant background, he joined the army in 1890, serving in the 60th Infantry Regiment. Soon after his enlistment, Vacher was transferred from his initial living quarters because he kept stealing and hiding the clothes of fellow soldiers. He was noted for his ill temper and aggressive behavior towards his compatriots. During his first year of service, he made at least 2 murder attempts on his superiors. In the first, frustrated at slow promotion, in the overblown belief that he was not receiving the attention he deserved, he made threats against Barbier, a recently promoted corporal from his unit. When Barbier arrived in Vacher's barracks to calm him down, he was attacked with a razor. Failing to cause any injury, Vacher instead tried to kill himself by slicing his throat in the first known suicide attempt. During another incident, Vacher tried to stab a sergeant with a pair of scissors. He was brought to the infirmary for overnight stays after both incidents, and following the second attack, he was heard screaming, "Blood! I'll kill him. They don't know what I'm capable of." During another outburst, Vacher lunged at the adjutant sergeant called Tissot with a razor when the latter confiscated a bottle of brandy from him. After this incident, he had a 4-month dismissal from the military. Despite what had occurred, Vacher was promoted to corporal the same year. After eventually reaching the rank of sergeant in December 1892, Vacher was known to punish soldiers for infractions by physically beating them, once nearly strangling a man to death. He narrowly escaped a court-martial. He was also known to steal from civilians, for which he was never charged, since the items were of such low value. He served for under 3 years, but would later claim to have been a commissioned officer, which is unlikely. He apparently evaded arrest in 1897 by saying he was an army sergeant to a gendarme who was about to book him for running away when he was stopped for questioning about a nearby murder which he may have been connected to. In the spring of 1893, he fell in love with a maid called Louise Barrant and proposed to her soon after. She declined because Vacher said he would kill her if she betrayed him in the same breath. He nevertheless attempted to move in with Barrant and her parents, and when that failed, he stalked her while she was at work and grew paranoid that Barrant had become involved with his best friend Louis Loyonnet, a fellow soldier. On the 21st of June, Vacher got into an argument with Barrant as she refused to acknowledge his letters and gifts. When she told him that she rejected the marriage offer, he grabbed her from behind and put a kitchen knife to her throat, shouting, "As good as today as tomorrow," but fled without harming her when he heard someone approaching. The following day, Vacher went back to Barrant's home and told her to either accept his proposal or return the letters and gifts. But before she could answer, Vacher shot her 3 times with a revolver. She was badly injured from a shot through her mouth, which broke off 2 front teeth, and had grazes to both temples, but she survived. He then attempted suicide by shooting himself twice in the head, but lived, instead paralyzing one side of his face, disfiguring him severely. One of the bullets remained lodged in his head for the remainder of his life, and the damage to his brain likely exacerbated his existing mental illness. He felt that the shooting damaged him more than physically, and he later claimed, after his arrest, that the reactions of strangers to his self-inflicted deformity drove him to a hatred of society at large. Barrant received dentistry treatment and returned to work within 2 weeks of the shooting. Vacher's scarred face and plain white handmade rabbit fur hat became his trademark appearance. In July, he was confined to a psychiatric hospital where he often attacked staff, destroyed furniture, and wrote letters to officials claiming he suffered abuse there. On the 2nd of August, he was discharged from the army. In December, a court found him not guilty of the attempted murder of Louise Barrant by reason of insanity, and he was transferred to the state-run Saint-Robert Psychiatric Hospital outside of Grenoble. He stayed there for 3 months until his doctors pronounced him completely cured and released in April 1894, having received a total of 10 months' treatment. Vacher began murdering his victims shortly after he was released, when he was aged 25. During a 3-year period beginning in 1894, he murdered and mutilated at least 11 people. Many of them were shepherds watching their flocks in isolated fields. The many victims were stabbed repeatedly, often disemboweled, and raped. He became a drifter and an unkempt vagrant in filthy clothes, travelling from town to town, from Normandy to Provence, surviving by begging or working on farms as a day labourer. He was very unkempt and frightening, begging in the streets and surviving on the scraps he received from anyone who would show him kindness. He was twice arrested for vagrancy, but never suspected of the killings. Over successive months, it is documented that Vacher had many interactions with families and villagers during his wanderings, but they all seemed to end badly. For instance, in mid-February 1897, Vacher lodged in the hamlet of Coulebrac. He stayed with two families, the Farencs and the Mauffrets, who later identified him by a photograph wearing his old infantry fatigues. He had also knocked on the door of Suzanne Cabrol, who allowed him to warm himself by the fireplace. They both talked amicably until Cabrol mentioned that she had received a 2,500 franc inheritance from her sister in Castres. At this point, the previously tranquil Vacher stared at her in a frightening and threatening manner, at which point Cabrol shouted for her husband, who was actually away, causing Vacher to bolt out of the house as fast as he could, and a potentially lucky escape for Cabrol. Which brings us back to the attack on Marie Héroud in August 1897, which she thankfully survived. Vacher was first charged with public indecency for attempted rape, receiving a 3-month prison sentence. Based on Judge Fourquet's belief that the arrested tramp might be the killer he was looking for, Vacher was imprisoned despite an attempt to escape while being transported there. The judge, who had investigated the murder of Augustine Mortereau in 1895, had judicial offices across southern France collect records of unsolved murders, having concluded that a single individual was behind some of the gruesome murders reported to him. 15 residents of Benonces, where a murder linked to Vacher had taken place, were called in, and all identified him as having been in the town at the time of the incident. Despite their belief that they had apprehended the man responsible, the authorities had little or no evidence that Vacher was linked to the series of murders that had plagued France for 3 years, and he adamantly denied any involvement. This suddenly changed when, under intense questioning on the 7th of October, with little apparent prompting, Vacher confessed to committing some of the murders, first only to 8, but later 11, saying, "I have come to tell you the whole truth. Yes, I am the one who committed all the crimes you accuse me of," in moments of frenzy and rage, adding that he simply washed away the blood from his hands and clothes in gutters and streams. It is acknowledged that he killed 11 victims between the 19th of May 1894 and the 19th of June 1897. During his trial, Vacher was also accused of an additional 33 killings, but these were never proved due to lack of evidence. Attributed to or confessed by him are 46 murders, 3 attempted murders, 2 attempted rapes, and connection to 1 disappearance. In some of the murders, false accusations were made by local residents and the press. Not long after the discovery of 1 victim, Eugénie Delhomme, farmer Louis François was arrested by police as a suspect, but later released, and his neighbours refused to speak to him again, and he was forced out of town. In another, Eugène Grenier, a landowner in Daix, who employed victim Augustine Mortereau, and one of the men who found the body, was detained for 45 days after being publicly accused, and a mob of locals outside the jail called for him to be lynched. Even after he was released, due to lack of evidence, he and his family were treated as outcasts, with suspicions still remaining after Vacher's confessions 2 years later. After his arrest, Vacher claimed he was insane and attempted to prove it in a variety of ways. He claimed that a rabid dog's bite had poisoned his blood, causing madness, but later blamed the doctor's treatment and medicines he had received for the bite. Despite his protestations, he was pronounced sane after lengthy investigations by a team of doctors. He was tried in January 1898 and convicted by Judge Vacher of the Court of Assizes in the town of Ain, where he had murdered two of his victims and was sentenced to death. He later broke out of his cell and seriously injured the on-duty guard by bashing him with a chair before he was subdued by other staff. He was taken to the guillotine at 7:03 a.m. on the 31st of December 1898 in front of a crowd of around 3,500 people. He refused to walk to the scaffold and was dragged to the place of his execution.